We are Hope 103.1 FM. Hope 103.1 FM. Why listen to anything else?
Chosen generation, we've been called for to show His excellence. All I require for life, God has given me, and I know who I am. We are a chosen generation, we've been called for to show His excellence. All I require.
Blessed afternoon.
I know who I am.
To every listener locked on to Hope 103.1 FM.
He says I am.
Indeed, it is a joy, a real joy to be here with you.
Who I am.
Another Wednesday afternoon. I tell you, the week is flying by pretty quickly.
He says I'm mad. I know who I am. I'm working in power. I'm working miracles. I live a life of favor.
It's 5 p.m. and we are gathered for another session of Leadership Plus.
I live a life of favor. I know who
I welcome all listeners across our radio, all listeners across the Caribbean listening on YouTube, and all across our internet platforms. Today we're discussing a big topic.
We are a chosen generation.
And we are here with Reverend John Lewis, who's going to share with us transformative information as it relates to our topic today, which is leadership begins with an attitude. Leaders think and perceive the world differently than followers.
I know who God says I am, what He says I am, where He says I'm at. I know who I am, I know who God says I am, what He says I am, where He says I'm at. I know who I am.
Pleasant afternoon to you, Reverend John. How are you today?
Good evening, and we're happy to share on this important discussion today. As you mentioned, its leadership begins with an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders think and perceive the world differently than followers do. And biblical text is found in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7, says, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is.
Mm-hmm. That is quite true. How was your week going so far before we jump into today's topic?
Great. Well, we are actively engaged in our class on the book of Esther. It's an exciting study. And Dr. George Frederick out of St. Vincent is our professor for this week. And we have a very interactive discussion on this study. And so that keeps us occupied on a Monday evening from 7 to 9 actually every week. And of course the work and ministry of Guide as we continue to expand the work and add new programs, add new initiatives to what we believe that God is calling us to. And shortly we will be adding some new programs, and of course coming up in the next month of May, God's willing, we'd offer our advanced leadership program. And we trust that our viewers and listeners will want to actively participate. This would be in class, and thankfully we can meet back face to face. And usually it's a program that we meet in our offices in Janangli one Saturday per month. And it's a 6 months intensive program. And so we have graduated a number of persons that allows graduation. And so this is a new cycle, a new book actually, about the idea of learning and winning as we learn. So that's an exciting feature of our study program that will come up within the next month or so. But we will provide further information and details about this class that is going to be open about the middle of May, God's willing. And so we look forward to our viewers and listeners to start this program with us. It's one of the texts of the John Maxwell team that we would use as the textbook for this program.
Okay.
And we have facilitators that will guide us through these discussions. So we want to encourage those of you who have been thinking about how you can improve your leadership skills and your personal growth and development to consider taking this particular short program, as it were.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And these are ways we can develop leadership skills. And as you mentioned today, as a man, our scripture for today, as a man thinketh, so is he. I found a very short story, if you permit me to read it, that talks about positive thinking. And it goes like this. Jerry was a kind of guy who you love to hate. He was always in a good mood and always had something positive to say. When someone would ask him how he was doing, he would reply, if I were any better, I would be twins. He was a unique manager because he had several waiters who had followed him around from restaurant to restaurant. The reason the waiters followed Jerry was because of his attitude. He was a natural motivator. If an employee was having a bad day, Jerry was there telling the employees how to look on the positive side of the situation. Seeing this style really made me curious. So one day I went up to Jerry and asked him, I don't get it. You can't be a positive person all the time. How do you do it? Jerry replied, each morning I wake up and say to myself, Jerry, you have two choices today. You can choose to be in a good mood or you can choose to be in a bad mood. I choose to be in a good mood. Each time something bad happens, I choose to be a victim or I can choose to learn from it. I choose to learn from it. Every time someone comes to me complaining, I can choose to accept their complaining or I can point to the positive side of life. I choose the positive side of life. You're right. It's not that easy, I protested. Yes, it is, Jerry said. Life is all about choices. When you cut away all the junk, every situation is a choice. You choose how to react to situation. You choose how people will affect your mood. You choose how to be in a good or bad mood. The bottom line, it's your choice how you live life. I reflected on what Jerry said. Soon thereafter, I left the restaurant industry to start my own business. We're almost at the end. We lost touch, but I often thought about him when I made a choice about life instead of reacting to it. Several years later, I heard that Jerry did something you're never supposed to do in the restaurant business. He left the back door open one morning and was held up at gunpoint by 3 armed robbers. While trying to open the safe, his hand, shaking from nervousness, slipped off the combination. The robbers panicked and shot him. Luckily, Jerry was found relatively quickly and rushed to the local trauma center. After 18 hours of surgery and weeks of intensive care, Jerry was released from the hospital with fragments of bullets still in his body. I saw Jerry about 6 months after the accident. When I asked him how he was, he replied, if I were any better, I'd be twins. Want to see my scars? I declined to see his wounds, but asked him what had gone through his mind as the robbery took place. The first thing that went through my mind was that I should have locked the back door, Jerry replied. Then as I lay on the floor, I remember that I had two choices. I could choose to live or I could choose to die. I chose to live. Weren't you scared? Didn't you lose consciousness? I asked. Jerry continued. The paramedics were great. They kept telling me I was going to be fine. But when they wheeled me into the emergency room and I saw the expressions on the faces of the doctors and nurses, I got really scared. In their eyes, read, he's a dead man. I knew I needed to take action. What did you do? I asked. Well, there was a big burly nurse shouting questions at me, said Jerry. She asked if I was allergic to anything. Yes, I replied. The doctors and nurses stopped working as they waited for my reply. I took a deep breath and yelled, bullets. Over their laughter, I told them I'm choosing to live. Operate on me as if I am alive, not dead. Jerry lived thanks to the skill of his doctors, but also because of his amazing attitude. I learned from him that every day we have a choice to live fully, and attitude, after all, is everything. Right? That took a few minutes, but it really encapsulates what we're going to be talking about today. Attitude. Leadership begins with attitude, and much people believe that it begins with skills, as the text points out. It believes with skills and experience, but we know that is not the truth. Could you tell us again, what does
Sure.
leadership really begin with?
Okay, so we're talking about the leadership begins with an attitude. And the part of our discussion, we'll read from the text. Of course, this material is credited to the Equip program by the John Maxwell team. It is common to assume that leadership is all about skills and techniques. In reality, our leadership begins when we possess the right attitude about our circumstances and ourselves. This is where all change takes place. Your attitude will determine your action. Your action will determine your accomplishments. And one of the things that we will focus on is some of the principles about attitudes. And the number one principle for today's discussion, it's my attitude as I begin a task will affect its outcome more than anything else. And just to read a quotation here, in so many situations, the battle is won before the battle has begun. It has to do with the frame of mind and in which we enter the battle. Are we full of faith and hope and optimism, or are we negative and doubtful of getting results? This principle was illustrated when Moses sent the 12 spies into the promised land. So the discussion would look at the differences in terms of the attitudes of the two men with a positive attitude, Joshua and Caleb, and the other 10 spies. So Joshua and Caleb saw the fruit in the land. So they saw possibilities. They saw the kind of result that they anticipated. Unlike the other persons, they saw the problems in the land. They saw how all the difficulties that they will confront will prevent them from taking this land. Joshua and Caleb saw themselves in God's hands. And that's an important point to emphasize.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself? Are you located in the hands of God, or are you seeing yourself as small and weak and insignificant? So this perception is going to be important. Josh and Caleb were optimistic about the future. And so they saw the potential of conquering this territory, of taking charge and taking authority over this land. Unlike the others, they were pessimistic about the future. It says, of course, when we read the text, they saw these giants. They were so huge before their eyes that they could not consider how they would overcome them. Joshua and Caleb encouraged stepping out in faith, and that is what motivates us when it becomes an integral part of our thinking and of our attitude. And the other spies prevented the people from progress because they communicated everything that was wrong about this adventure and then this initiative. So we need to check our attitude. So here's a checklist for all of us. What is my usual attitude at the beginning of a new experience? How do we approach a new idea, a new job, a new concept, a new project? What is your usual attitude? Is it one of anticipation of success and accomplishing the task and finishing the goal well?
Mhm.
Are there certain new experiences that cause me to feel negative? So sometimes you're faced with, it seems, insurmountable tasks, and that may affect um, our attitude. And do these areas help determine my success with God, family, or ministry?
Mhm.
So attitude, as we have said before on this program, determines your altitude in terms of what you will achieve. And number two is that my attitude toward others determines their attitude toward me. Very often we turn this around on those who may have attitudes or you perceive attitudes toward you. And if you really check the facts, you would find out that it very often it is perception and not reality. You may assume that others may have particular attitudes toward you, but when you do sit down and have a face-to-face conversation, um, most of the time you discover that these were perceptions, unfounded perceptions
Yeah.
on the part of others.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, people are like mirrors. They will
Mhm.
reflect the attitude of their leader. You must initiate the attitude you want to return. Leaders must understand this to get results. Um, so the attitude of the leader is often reflected in the attitudes of the followers. As just as you want people to treat you, treat them in the same way.
Mhm.
And so there's a research found in the discussion today um, in terms of the person's success on a job. 13% experience success due to the understanding the product. But listen, 87% due to understanding the people. So we talked about the importance of understanding the value of people when we talked about the value of the human capital and the human value that people bring to an organization. It seemed to suggest from this research the vast difference between 87% of your people understanding. And we talked about how you can understand your people in terms of the personality styles, in terms of how they respond in different circumstances and situations. And so there's some leadership steps with people, and it's a discipline that every good leader will seek to develop. Remember the name of your followers, of your team members. Nothing makes a person feel more important than having to ask them, well, what's your name again? After they have told you that probably several times. Remember their name in one of the books that was published many years ago. Um, it talks about the significance of remembering people's name and faces. Recognize their potential. So remember the name of your team members, of those that you serve. Recognize their potential. Nothing makes a person feel more unique. Affirming people gives them that sense of importance in terms of their work and their job and their responsibilities. And these principles, are emphasized again and again about recognizing people's potential, affirming their abilities. We talked about uh, demonstrating appreciation in private and in public and by gifts and in different ways that we affirm people and express appreciation that is meaningful for people's role and work. as a follower or as a leader in the organization. And the third R is request their help. Nothing makes a person feel more useful when you acknowledge their gifts and abilities to help in a particular way or area of work, and you ask for their help and ask for their skills and their support in what you do. Unfortunately, the fourth R is reward their efforts. Nothing makes a person feel more valuable. So we must acknowledge the contribution that people are making to your organization, reward them publicly, privately, express it often, and provide rewards. So these 4 R's in the 4 important leadership steps with people. Remember the name, recognize their potential, request their help, and reward their efforts. These 4 disciplines or practices will take us a long way forward in developing an environment of growth and success and accomplishing particular goals. So those are the first 2 principles: attitude toward others, and then we talked about what's your initial attitude in terms of entering into a new project or a new endeavor. So those are 2 important concepts in terms of our attitude and how we will get things done through people, because no one can successfully accomplish anything great without the help of others. And thirdly, my attitude is the major difference between success and failure. Proverbs 4:23 says to us, watch over your heart and guard it with all diligence, for all from it flow the springs of life. Proverbs 4:23. And of course, this is a book of wisdom. You consider them for a moment. Those are things that will detract you from accomplishing your goals. A right attitude can make up for what you may lack in resources. So you want to do an evaluation of your attitude. What attitude do you project each day as you leave your home, as you go out on the road? It affects the way you travel. It affects your performance on the road. If you are in a fuss and upset as you leave the home, the attitudes come out in your actions and how you maneuver and respond to others, as opposed to if you are quieted and you have a positive attitude about how your day would look. It makes a world of difference in terms of the people that you meet first at your place of work. Whether you respond with a bright hello, howdy, good morning, or whether you pass them straight and with a puff and a huff and rushing because for some reason you've been late for your job or for your work. So it starts with attitude, as it says, in every area of work. It affects the environment in which you serve as well. Attitude is contagious.
Very contagious. Very
Yes.
contagious. Yeah.
So you would observe that in your home as well, where among your family members, among your children, in the neighborhood in which you live. So it impinges on your work environment as well. How do people perceive your attitude toward them, and how they respond to you as well? People tend to respond, unfortunately, in kind to attitudes.
Very true.
If you are condescending in the attitude, people tend to respond that way. If you are appreciative in the attitude, people respond. Like we said, that attitude is like a mirror.
Mirror, yeah.
Right. So as you look in the mirror each day and you look at yourself and you make sure you're fit for your job or to go out in the public in the same way. It is much more than just a physical appearance. Attitude is greater, far greater than the color of your appearance or the kind of clothing that you wear. It's something that comes from you, the real you, in the bottom of your heart and of your life. So that positive attitude, that from the biblical perspective, it's a Christ-like attitude, and the command is to mirror and reflect the image of Christ in your life, so others might know that it is because of Christ who lives and dwells within you as a leader that you are enabled to reflect these attitudes of joy and peace and kindness and respect and hope. And so the foundation or the resources that we find for these attitudes that are helpful and uplifting comes as a result of a dynamic relationship with Jesus Christ. Number 4, my attitude can turn my problems into blessing. Have this attitude in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as a thing to be grasped at. And so the attitude here of one of humility. And when we're addressing a problem, as we noted before, there has to be an awareness we have a problem. We evaluate it, what went wrong, and then the choices. That is where attitude steps in. We can begin dreaming or become disappointed. We can start building or start blaming. So you want to take note of those 2 words. You can start building or start blaming. And that makes all the difference in how you start a project or a situation you have to deal with. We can get busy or get angry. We can conquer or quit. Whether the problem becomes a blessing depends on you more than God. And so this is how we are driven by the fact that people who have experienced difficulties, they rose above their circumstances. And one example in the text today is the fact that a lot of these Bible writers were imprisoned, oppressed, and they were in captivity when they were writing a lot of the scriptural writings that we read today. We have so many examples of that. They could have become angry, and they could have become disturbed. And you just take one example for our own reflection today. You look at the life of Joseph in the Old Testament, and you recognize that he had enough reason to hate his brothers. Yeah, even from his youth, when they called him the dreamer, when he would report on their bad behavior to his parents. Of course, the story of his being sold into slavery, his reputation being tarnished, and imprisoned as a result of his integrity, years in prison. It was quite easy for such a person in those experiences to hate people. But we saw the outcome of his life when his brothers came and realized this, they could be in real trouble now. And they said that surely he's going to take vengeance now. He's going to get back at us. And that was not the case. He said to them, God had sent him ahead of them so that he could be a provider for them and their families and their children. And so perspective, my attitude can give me an uncommon perspective on life. So a leader says some people see things as they are and say, why? I look at things that are not and say, why not? So perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Very often we are entrenched in the idea that nothing can change in this particular situation, or we cannot do anything to move the needle, as it were. Um, and this is perspective. There's a great story that is right here before us, and it is about a shoe salesman was sent to a faraway country, and after a few days, he sent back the message: "Coming home, nobody wears shoes here."
Mm-hmm.
Another salesman from the shoe company visited the same country. He went back to the home office after a few days. "Send more shoes. Nobody has them yet over here."
Mm-hmm.
It was the same situation,
Yeah, yeah,
but it was seen from a different perspective.
yeah.
Um, Same setting, same environment, same realities, but perspective. Um, and that changes everything in how you respond and
Mm-hmm.
how your attitude changes.
Yeah.
And Robert Clinton says the primary difference between a follower and a leader is perspective. The
Mm-hmm.
primary difference between a leader and an effective leader is better perspective.
Yeah.
So it's a question for our own thinking and our own thoughts. What's your perspective on life, for example? What's your perspective on the circumstances that you're facing right now?
Yeah.
Um, and it's amazing. This is just a great example
Mm-hmm.
of these two salesmen. He goes into a country, nobody's wearing shoes. He figures, well, why is he trying to sell shoes to a place that
Oh.
nobody wears them?
Mm-hmm.
The second salesman says, "Man, this is the place to sell
An
shoes."
opportunity. He saw an
Yeah,
opportunity. Yeah.
yes, yes. Of course, opportunity is knocking at his door.
Mm-hmm.
Send us containers of shoes
Right,
because
right.
um, everybody would need a pair of shoes at some point.
That
So,
story kind of
mhm,
reminds me of the spies, back to
yes, of
Caleb and
course.
Joshua, because
Mhm,
they were 12 of the, more or less the top leaders in Israel at that time. They were
mhm,
selected and sent out, but their perspective, there were two different perspectives of what was seen. And
mhm.
we know that perspectives are influenced by what you're taught and what you experience or your environment. So leaders have to be very careful, of the way perspectives rather, because you can either help or bring advantage or disadvantage to the followers that you're leading. And it just pays that we have to be very take an active role, in what we allow to influence our minds, what we listen to, what we speak, what we do, because our perspective can help or disadvantage others.
Absolutely. And we see many examples of that among us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because the challenge is to probably take the less challenge road, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
where it's very popular. Because this was 10 guys basically against the opinion of two guys who decided, we want to see things differently.
Yeah.
Our vision is different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so again, it has to do with
But the mind,
the mindset.
the mind,
Yes,
the
with the
mind.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the mindset. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about that. There are two classifications of mindsets. One is one that is open to
Mm-hmm.
new concepts and new ideas and innovations. And the one is basically a closed mindset. Well, we haven't done this before. We have never seen it work,
Right.
and therefore it cannot be done. And we
Mm-hmm.
have seen examples of that in so many of the business lessons. We take, for example, watches. You recall the story when um, watches were being wound up and because it had a little spring in it. And then when it was going digital, some companies refused to change that concept that this thing cannot go digital.
Mm-hmm.
And so when other companies took the initiative and went digital, this company was basically out of business.
Mm.
And we see so many innovations taking place today,
Yeah.
and this is how we capitalize on them. And so, in terms of forward thinking, and in terms of the opportunities for your own personal growth and personal development, and so you want to advance your own leadership skills. You want to read. You want to study.
Have a superior belief system.
And take advantage of the opportunities that you have.
Because as we would have mentioned, if you fail to read or you fail to grow, I think we mentioned that in the previous, we cannot lead. Basically, if you don't grow, or should I say, put it in this way, if you do not have a superior belief system, then your thinking will not be good, and then you will not be able to follow or lead rather the followers to the objectives, efficiently and effectively,
Absolutely.
as needed. So you have to have a good belief system, and your mind must be well programmed, or should I say, following the word of the Lord and good ways.
Okay, because we admonished and taught in scripture about our attitude,
Mm-hmm.
and many examples of how um, the examples were communicated of having faith. If you have it, if you've seen a mustard seed, you could hardly recognize it with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge that if even though your faith looks as tiny as small as a mustard seed, you can still do great things with that faith.
Yeah.
My attitude is my best friend or my worst enemy. The good man out of his good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth what is evil. For his mouth speaks from what fills his heart. And so, as we would have said before, the heart of the matter is the matter of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Attitude creates momentum, positive or negative, for your work, for your job, for your church, for your organization. Leaders know this. Business executives say the most important elements for potential employers and employees are 5% availability, 5% adaptability, 10% ability. It's interesting that 0% of how you look or your appearance.
Mm-hmm.
But look how the percentages change dramatically. 70% because of the attitude.
Yeah.
The importance of attitude in both leaders and team members. Practicing psychologists list 5 rules for evaluating people considered for job promotion: ambition, attitudes towards policy, attitudes towards colleagues, leadership skills, attitudes to pressure on the job. So it really it's such an integral part of life in terms of how you respond to policies and how it affects your desires and ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
A survey was taken among customers, discovered they quit buying goods from certain stores. Here's what they discovered. Here's what they discovered. 1% died, 3% moved away, 5% other friendships, 9% of competitive reasons, 14% product dissatisfaction, 68% because of an attitude of an indifference shown to them by an employee. So how significant is that in terms of a business closing out?
Mm-hmm.
A business cannot function if the attitude of your employees is so negative and does not encourage customer satisfaction. So people have left companies and they have gone to other places to shop
Mhm.
because when they enter this particular business place, they weren't shown respect for what the products that they were looking for. And we see that quite often in business places that you would go and you want to shop. Um, if they're aware of the quantity or the amount that you are intending to spend, that might have changed the attitude. You only discover
Mhm.
that you went somewhere else and
Right.
what your shopping was going to be. And so in the business community, of course, customer service, the first person you meet at the door can determine how well you shop there or whether you go to the competitor. Not only happens in business in that sense, but also within our church community. So we're talking about the attitudes when you are asked to meet and welcome people, meet and greet, as it were, or ushering is perhaps the church word. Um, how well trained are your greeters of people who attend your particular church facility, a church service? Do people have to search, especially when you have visitors? Do they have to find their seats by themselves, or is there someone who meets them, greets them, and welcomes them, and take them into a place where they can find seating without having to feeling uncertain about where they ought to be seated? And those practices can determine whether a visitor to your church or to your organization
Yeah.
would come back, or they would find better um, attitudes
Right.
affecting their activities.
Mhm.
Hoteliers, people would stay at a particular hotel because the staff,
Yeah.
the staff's attitude is welcoming and accommodating and helping to make them comfortable in their stay. And that's why people will tend to repeat their visit to particular places of accommodation.
Yeah.
They would not change
Mhm.
to another place.
Mhm.
And so it really affects every aspect of life, whether it's socially, whether it's politically, whether it's in the business community. And number 7, my attitude, not my achievements, will give me happiness. The thoughts in your mind are more important than the things in your life. Again, the thoughts of your mind are more important than the things in your life. Very often we flip that around and think and believe that the things that are in your life
Yeah.
are more important
Right.
than what's in your mind.
Right.
Too many leaders think if they just could move to a new place or have different circumstances, they would be happy. There's a term that is used for that. We call this destination disease. So it's the concept or the thinking that
Yeah.
if we could just move to a different place,
Mhm.
all our problems will be taken care of.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen like that because the truth of the matter, you take yourself with you wherever you go.
That's right. Your mind and
Um,
your attitude.
you take that with you wherever you go to live.
Yes.
Leaders must be cured of this.
Mhm.
So there's some personal evaluation about here. How have you ever thought these thoughts? If I could just serve in a different place, I'd be happier.
Mm.
Like we just indicated, that is not not necessarily so.
Mm.
If I just knew that person, I'll be satisfied. Um, if things were different here, I would be okay. If
Mm.
I would not have done that, I'd feel better about myself. So it's one of remorse. And then number 8, my attitude will change when I choose to change it. So it's a choice.
Down to choice. It's all
It's
a
it's a
choice.
Yeah, it comes down to personal choice. We cannot tailor make the situations of our life and leadership, but we can tailor make the attitude to fit them before they arrive. Here's how to tailor make your attitude. One, believe it is not what happens to you, but what happens in you.
Most.
That matters most. So it is not what happens to you, but in you. Stop blaming something or someone else for your attitude. You have the right to choose your attitude and not allow people to influence your attitude. Evaluate your present attitudes. How, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your present attitude? Are you optimistic? So you have a bright 5, or you somewhere in the middle, you're not sure, or you down on the negative side. Recognize that faith is stronger than fear. So it is the faith and confident trust in God in the first instance, and faith and confidence in others as well, trust in others. Request God to fill you with His Holy Spirit. And that's the starting point for the Christian person, that it is Christ who fills you with the Spirit who enables you to have the right attitude. Let the mind of Christ dwell in you richly. And that is empowered. This is not self-talk or positive thinking in that sense. This has to do with an indwelling power and presence of the Holy Spirit of God that enables you, in spite of your own desire to be negative and expressions to be negative, that the Spirit can overcome that. Uncover and write out the statement of purpose. Write what is it that you want to accomplish. Enlist the help of an accountability person or partner, someone that can keep you on track. Someone could ask you questions about how was your attitude the past week. Spend time with the right people. So the people that we associate with influence can influence us. So determine who are within we talked about the inner circle of the leader.
Right.
Select a model to follow, consume the truth. And of course, the scriptures provide the concepts for us. So the conditions are there, but you make the choice. As you mature, life is governed more by your choices than by your conditions or circumstances. And then number 9, my attitude needs continual adjustment. So here's some indicators for attitude adjustment. 1, I have not had enough time with God or myself. Is that true of you, or is that an area that you're good at? My family notices and tells me about my attitude. My relationships with coworkers become strained. My view of people begins to lower. My perspective on life becomes cynical. When we look at these indicators, it can show us where we need to do some work or we need to brush up on. And then number 10, my attitude is contagious. We may have mentioned this earlier. People catch our attitudes like they catch a cold from us by getting close to us.
That is so true. That is so true.
Yes. What positive attitudes do people catch from you? Yes, question for reflection. What positive attitudes do people catch from you? And what negative attitudes do people catch from you?
That's 2 good questions. 2 great questions. Keeps you in check.
Check them. And then assessment. List the top 3 attitude problems within your organization, within your company, within your church even. What are the 3 attitude problems that you you observe or what you see demonstrated. And these are exercises that every leader can expose their leadership to, their membership to in a church setting, in a business community, because these concepts, are concepts that they are applicable to every situation and circumstance. Why do you think these attitudes exist within the majority of people? Unfortunately, it seems to suggest that the majority of people that you'll run into are people who need adjustments in the attitude. How deeply are these attitudes entrenched within people? How many years, how many people, how many leaders is this a problem in you? And some application. Model the right attitude for people. Well, when you develop a strategy for changing attitude, model the right attitude, identify and connect them with leaders, disciple leaders in the subject of attitude, preach the truths, hold people accountable for their attitude. So there's always the room for an attitude check within an organization, even within the family setting.
Yeah.
How are we projecting our attitudes toward one another in terms of the home front?
I think the
But
family
also,
is a good place to start, because the family affects the society, the community, and so forth. It trickles down and trickles up. So the family indeed is a good place to address attitudes.
right. So these are some important pointers in how we can adjust to these attitudes.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 50 minutes or so, we have been discussing under the topic leadership begins with an attitude. And indeed, we have to take an active or direct role in making a right choice as it relates to our attitude, how we respond to circumstances, how we behave according to what's happening. And we've been talking about 10 rather biblical principles about attitudes. And listening there, it really encourages that what you put in is what you get out. We have to pay attention to our minds and our perspective, because it determines our actions, how we respond, how we act. And again, I think we have to pay attention to what we dwell on. If we dwell on negative things, if we listen to wrong things, if we watch the wrong things, it affects our mindsets, and then our choices, our perspective, is affected adversely. And of course, we can start displaying bad attitudes, saying the wrong things, and then can be like the 10 spies and hinder tens of thousands from entering into their promises, because as leaders, attitudes are bad. So for the past few moments, we have been encouraged to watch our attitude, to check it, to ensure that we're thinking and we have the right mindset and the right perspectives. Do you have any final words before we pull down the curtains for today, Reverend John?
Well, it's a moment for reflection and how we can change some of the attitudes that affect us in terms of the success for our leadership, the application, the strategy we'd probably remind you of. Develop the strategy for changing those attitudes. Model the right attitude in yourself, self-adjustment, alignment with the positive and right attitude, and connect them with the people around you. Disciple others in your sphere of work or sphere of influence. How do you teach these principles so that others can benefit from them? Teach, explain, demonstrate these truths and hold people accountable for their attitude. It is not right for people to disrespect others on the job or unfortunately within the church and get away with it. And usually the excuse is that's how they are.
Mhm.
Well, that's a lame way to describe that behavior. And how do we address those kinds of responses to um, behavioral attitudes that unfortunately affects people um, in the negative sense?
Mhm.
And so when you reflect upon the life of Christ, um, in the midst of all the, the, the work and ministry that he accomplished in his short years that he lived on earth, he demonstrated this attitude of hope,
Yeah.
presented the ministry of life and hope and redemption, salvation to this world. And perhaps never than before, we need to demonstrate those truths of hope, um, of redemption, of expressions of joy and peace in the midst of all that is happening in our world today. The pain, the suffering that we see and observe, particularly at this time in the global news in Ukraine, and I'm sure other parts of the world, by the world's focus is on what's happening to the death and destruction of people and properties um, in that area of the world. And we need to remember to pray for them, um, to remember to um, encourage and support in whatever way we can. There are opportunities for people to give um, to these different um, opportunities in giving of your resources. There are international agencies, and of course, if you are aware of an agency or a church organization, we would want to encourage you to participate in helping the refugees, the millions of refugees. We are all seeing those news and could find practical ways to assist and to help during these difficult times.
Mhm. And so again, thank you, Reverend John. Just to remind us about those principles, about attitudes, biblical attitudes, there are 10. My
Correct.
attitude as I begin, a task will affect its outcome more than anything else. My attitude towards others determine their attitude toward me. My attitude is a major difference between success and failure. My attitude can turn my problems into blessings. My attitude can give me an uncommon perspective on life, and my attitude is my best friend or my worst enemy. My attitude, not my achievements, will give me happiness. My attitude will change when I choose to change it. My attitude needs continual adjustment, and my attitude is contagious. Let's be very conscious and make an intentional decision to have the right attitude every day. And as our story in the beginning said, Jerry got up every morning and made a decision to be happy or to choose life or to choose the brighter side or choose not to complain. The choice is ours. Yes, the choice is ours and our attitude is ours. So again, thank you for joining us on another session of Leadership Plus. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and to be here with Reverend John Lewis, who expounds such useful information that we can apply each day to our lives, and we can see betterment if we sit down and do the evaluation. Once you put it to work and we employ the information, we will see those good results. And I invite you to join us again next Wednesday for another session of Leadership Plus. And by way of information, right now, as we speak, there is a session going on in the Marion playing field held by, hosted by Hope. It's called Burn It, and it's an exercise session. It started about half an hour ago. So if you're interested and you're in the vicinity, you can check them right there. They're there's a fitness trainer on site, and you can get prepared for our Walk with Hope on April 23rd. So if you want to burn the extra calories, head on out to the Miriam playing field. Again, thanks for joining us, Reverend John. We appreciate you sharing with us today again.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Have
All
a
right.
wonderful evening.
Yes, you do the same. And thank you again, listeners, for joining us. Do enjoy the balance of your Wednesday and your week. God bless you. Bye-bye.